I wasn't planning to play this game anytime soon, but last year I got the itch to try another Fire Emblem, and Three Houses' relative shiny newness kept calling to me. I'm glad I answered. Prior to this, I'd only played Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn, so I was excited to try out a different style of FE game and see how the series has evolved since the Wii era. Now, if you're looking for in-depth plot discussion, you won't find that here, but I'll touch on the story a bit, and will note that I've played the Azure Moon, Crimson Flower, and Verdant Wind paths. I was a little burnt out after those, but I'll check out Silver Snow eventually. Alright, let's get to the gameplay. For the unfamiliar, Fire Emblem is a turn-based strategy series where you move units on a board similar to chess. Generally, the goal is to vanquish your enemies using a bevy of unit types, weapons, and special skills, all in a vaguely medieval world. Three Houses, though, feels more modern to me. There's no cars or cell phones or other current tech or anything, but the monastery, which is the game's home base location, looks like something out of Harry Potter rather than Game of Thrones. With bright and vibrant colors, even during dark story beats, the game's got a nice cel-shaded style that fits the series. While I'd personally like to see a more realistic approach in the future, I enjoy this style too, and it sure is gorgeous. Mostly anyway. More on that later, and by the way, consider leaving a like on this video. It really helps the channel reach more RPG fans, and subscribe for weekly videos on Fire Emblem and other RPGs of all kinds. While I haven't played Fire Emblem Fates, I know the decision to split that story across multiple games in order to charge customers thrice was met with a sour reception by many fans. That's no surprise. This time, however, Intelligent Systems makes a vital adjustment by putting multiple stories in the same game. Imagine that! Like Fates, as far as I understand, you play out the viewpoints of various powers in a war, only this time you get to see how they relate during a time of peace, and even get to know your foreign countrymen. There's still a kingdom with separate powers vying for dominance, but for the first half of the game, they're working together. You play as Byleth, a new professor at Garreg Mach Monastery, a castle devoted to the church that lies in neutral territory, smack dab in the middle of the land of Fodlan. Students from each of the three territories make up the three schoolhouses of the game, one of which you pick to lead. In fact, you can recruit almost any other student into your own house who will stay with you even after the war begins. Well, most characters will anyway. There's plenty of time to get to know your students, explore, and even do optional tasks to raise either Byleth's weapon ranks or motivate your students, which gives them points to use for training their own ranks. For someone coming from the Tellius games, this is a lot to take in, but it's a welcome change that I had a ton of fun with. Instead of just being able to buy weapons and manage items between battles, Three Houses' calendar system gives you multiple opportunities per month to choose activities to complete, such as exploring the monastery, doing optional fights for XP, or attending lectures, all before the main story battle happens at the end of the month. These add-a-battle sections almost feel like a life sim or Persona game. You can even fish, grow vegetables, and chat with anyone in the monastery, all of which ties into the gameplay, whether by boosting your stats or giving you access to better equipment or characters. With all this variety, I didn't get bored, even though my first playthrough took me 92 hours. Boy, these games keep getting bigger, and Intelligent Systems has fully embraced the modern trend of long-ass RPGs. I can't knock it for that though. For someone who doesn't devote so much of their life to RPGs like I do, Three Houses could easily satisfy for an entire year, all for $60. Not bad. And that 92 hours, by the way, was just for one storyline out of 4 total, though all share mostly the same maps, and the first half of the story is virtually identical in each. Some players understandably don't like this aspect since it sure seems like the game was rushed and a lot of house-specific content got cut, but I don't mind due to the near-infinite replayability. There's so many potential strategies and characters you can try out to keep each playthrough feeling fresh, and even just one playthrough makes for a complete experience on its own. It's not all great though. The monastery underwhelms both visually and performance-wise, with frequent frame drops and a general last-gen feel, and some of the activities available are downright boring, like fishing or collecting lost items. Thankfully, both are optional, especially on New Game Plus playthroughs. And a new feature lets you zoom into your units on the battlefield where you see them up close alongside their battalions, but this feels underbaked. I could never angle the camera how I like, moving the cursor is janky, and there's too much graphical clipping to say it looks good. It's kinda cool, but I never use this view during combat. Maybe Intelligent Systems will get this right in a future game, cause it could be a great addition to the series if done well. Also, unlike the Tellius games, Three Houses allows you to fight optional battles between story missions. You can do them almost every week in fact, if you want to. This seems like overkill, and it is. During my first playthrough, I found it useful to battle twice a month or so as I got a feel for the game, but looking back, the amount of time this takes isn't worth it, so for my second time around I chose to explore more often, both the build supports, which are basically character relationships, and train by less ranks, which affect how much you can get done in a single month. The game's flexible enough that both approaches work great, but I'd prefer no optional battles, or maybe just a few during the course of the story. Enough to feel stronger for a couple missions, maybe some nice reward items, but nothing that makes much of a difference stat-wise by the end. Sure, you can skip these battles, but I found it hard to resist that sweet experience on a first playthrough. Maybe I'm too obsessive. Building supports and watching them grow, on the other hand, is rewarding. Certainly more than in the Tellius games where you could only build them during combat. I never liked that system much, since when I'm in battles I want to focus on the action and not waste turns positioning units just to raise supports. Thankfully, Three Houses throws all that out in favor of various ways to improve bonds between almost any pair of students or professors, including Byleth, all outside of combat. Whether by sharing meals, giving gifts, or singing together in the choir, there's plenty of ways to increase your character's affections, and unlike in previous Fire Emblems I've played, you've got an abundance of opportunities to do so. By the end of each playthrough, I'd completed all supports for all students in my house as well as for those I'd recruited with a bit of time to spare. That feels good. Support conversations are often charming, funny, or touching, and I rarely wanted to skip them. I even let the dialogue play all the way through instead of just pushing A once I got done reading, which impatient old me tends to do. On my first playthrough, I went with the Japanese voice acting like usual, but unlike most JRPGs, the English VA turned out to be pretty damn great when I gave it a chance, and I stuck with it for my other playthroughs. That is rare indeed for me. And some of the convos were among my favorite parts of the game. They're the primary way Three Houses fleshes out its characters, and I often chose certain units for my battle party just because I liked their personalities. This is a critical difference that separates Fire Emblem from many other strategy games, and it's one of the things I like most about the series. I grew to care about all my students, and of course, I never let any of them die. I'm a sucker for happy endings. I played on hard mode exclusively, as I haven't yet felt up to the challenge of any Fire Emblem game's highest difficulty. On hard, almost any strategy works, and I enjoy the freedom Three Houses class system provides. Unlike some previous FE games, any character can become any class, with the exception of a few gender-specific ones, which makes the game more of an RPG than ever. While many classes aren't so great, and some characters have clear options that best fit their inherent traits, any class can become viable on hard by putting enough work into raising the required weapon and class ranks. And normal difficulty is a joke. You can breeze through the game doing whatever you want, or so I've gathered from watching various playthroughs by fellow YouTubers. This freeform system gives you a ton of options. Each character has a unique personal skill which ranges from almost useless to an essential part of the unit strategy. You might want to work a character toward a particular endgame class that takes full advantage of their personal skill to make battles easier, or you could ignore it and still do just fine. Honestly though, many of these skills don't make much of a difference, and during battles I tended to forget they were even in the game. Classes have inherent skills too, including one mastery skill which characters get to keep forever once they've reached the max level for that class, even if they change classes later. I love mechanics like this in RPGs. While many skills are too situational or weak to be worth it, others are very useful, such as Death Blow, which gives +6 to strength when the user initiates combat. It's a good idea to send your best attackers through the Brigand class to grab it, and that's just one example of many. Some of the best skills are locked behind gender-specific classes like the Pegasus Knight's Dart and Blow, and choosing how to best use the characters you've got helps make each playthrough different. The amount and variety of skills is impressive, especially for someone who had only played the Tellius games at that point. In my Blue Lions playthrough, my Annette got a bunch of nice level ups resulting in a great magic stat, so I turned her into a destruction-bringing Wyvern Lord, wielding a magic axe. She's now my favorite character. Battalions and their associated gambits are the fancy new battle mechanic this time around. I'm weary of major changes to series I love, but these add a layer of strategy much needed for this more than 30-year-old franchise. It took me a while to realize this though. Each unit can equip a battalion, and ostensibly the main reason to use one is for its gambit, an attack that has high accuracy but relatively low damage, in addition to preventing its target from moving on the next turn. That gives you a lot more options than your traditional Fire Emblem game, with the trade-off that a unit who uses a gambit could have otherwise attacked, which is why I ignored battalions initially. Even once you get gambits that target multiple units, attacking is almost always the better choice, at least on hard mode, and it's difficult to justify using a gambit except in a few specialized situations, such as guaranteeing damage against a boss with a high evasion chance or freezing a scary enemy in place so your units can run away. It's worth noting that a few gambits heal your units instead, but I found these less useful than traditional methods like vulneraries or dedicated healers. Perhaps there's good strategies for maddening mode that use them though. As I understand, on maddening, gambits become much more useful in general. No, gambits aren't why I love battalions. See, they also give stat bonuses to units who equip them. These aren't minor bonuses either. By the end of the game, you can get as high as +3, +5, even +8 or 10 to key stats. In a game where 40 strength is considered a lot, that's huge. And these are passive bonuses that remain as long as your battalions have health, which is easy to keep up by avoiding taking damage, which you want to do as much as possible anyway. Since there's limited amounts of each battalion type, and some are much better than others, deciding which battalions to assign to which units and keeping all this info in your head while you play is the fun part for me. A lot of crazy strategies open up once you're giving attention to all the game's mechanics, and while they don't end with battalions, I'll move on. Three Houses has fantastic music. From the slowed-down version of the famous title theme, complete with haunting vocals, to the numerous epic songs that pump you up for battle and keep you focused once in it, the entire soundtrack is more than solid and stands alongside Radiant Dawn as the best of the Fire Emblem OSTs I've heard so far. A few songs don't stick out as much as others, but there's at least, I don't know, 5 or 6 that I can still hum to this day over a year after playing the game, and they're mostly battle tracks. Seriously, I can't sell enough how great these are, easily the highlights of the OST, and they only get more badass the further you progress. All of Three Houses' composers deserve massive raises. I do wish I could choose the music for story battles though, even if only on New Game Plus. Sometimes there's a track I think would fit better on a certain map, and it also gets old hearing the same song multiple battles in a row. That's not a big deal though, this soundtrack is stellar overall, even throwing in some crazy electronic dubstep stuff. Does anyone even call it dubstep anymore? Or maybe this is what kids call trap music? I don't know. Either way, it's a neat touch that fits well into the game thematically, and I love how the music has evolved along with the series. Back to the characters real quick. This has gotta be the most satisfying RPG I've played in a long time, both in variety of personalities and in growth across its cast. Practically everyone gets at least a few scenes where I enjoyed learning what they're all about, despite how vastly different each student is. Ferdinand von Aegir, for example, would seem boring if you read his description, but there's a lot going on under his perfect noble persona. I could understand his motivations just as easily as I could Hubert's or Claude's or Ingrid's, even when I couldn't necessarily relate, and in Ferdinand's case, his legendary, meme-worthy battle quote makes perfect sense in context. Of course that's what he would say.
I am Ferdinand von Aegir.
God, I could spend hours talking what I love about each character, but that's not what this video's for, maybe in a future stream or something. Anyway, the amount and quality of conversations you get over the course of each massive playthrough go a long way toward making this game special. If you're a fan, you already know this, but it's hard to qualify until you've played it, and I suggest you do. It's the perfect intro to the series for newcomers, and longtime fans, well, you don't need me to say more. Thanks for watching. Leave a like for that algorithm, subscribe for weekly videos on RPGs, let me know what you thought of Three Houses in the comments, and have a blessed day.